Welcome back to Sportz Blitz Live. Luke Robinson here. Continuing our SEC preview, right now we're going to talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks. And with me I've got Tom Murphy from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Tom, how you doing this evening?
Doing quite well. I'm glad to be on your show.
Hey, we certainly do appreciate your being with us. My first question, and I know you've probably gotten this a lot, but how's the segue from Petrino to John L. Smith been so far?
Well, it's what the players wanted, and I think Jeff Long, the AD, realized that with the talent they had coming back, with guys who had committed, who had considered, leaving early for the draft like Tyler Wilson, and now if they committed to come back, that he owed it to them to give them the best 2012 season they could possibly imagine. And if you had done anything else, if you'd hired from outside or possibly promoted an assistant that could have, engendered some rough feelings and what have you, this is the best plan they could have to go forward to make those players feel good about where they were. Paul Petrino's offense will still be intact. It's just that he'll be calling the plays. And quite frankly, I think John L. Smith's presence will give their defense really more of make them more of a focal point. I think sometimes things happen with Arkansas that to the detriment of their defense. Colton Miles Nash, a gifted player, has been a defensive end. He got moved to tight end because, he was about third or fourth on the depth chart, and Petrino needed him at tight end. Those kind of things happen. So I think it's been relatively seamless. In-game calls, pressure calls, when timeouts are made, two-minute drills, things like that will test how John L. Smith handles those things.
You mentioned Tyler Wilson and Knile Davis. Of course, they're two of the more prominent names in the SEC this year. A lot of people think that they will be well up there, maybe even in the Heisman voting. Which one of those two do you think has the best shot of winning SEC Offensive Player of the Year?
Wow, that's a good question. I would consider it around 50-50. I mean, I think for Arkansas to be a superior team, to be a team that has a chance to win these difficult road games they have, and to possibly beat one or both of the big power Alabama LSU combo, that Knile Davis is running is really going to have to balance out the attack. He really came on in the second half of 2010, but that was all after they had lost to Alabama and just after they'd lost to Auburn. I mean, that was right when he started coming along. From that point forward, they were a different team. If they can get that same type of balance early in a season, I think that it gives them a shot to win that elusive early conference game against Alabama that's really kind of haunted them the last several years.
Speaking of that game against Alabama, Arkansas also travels to Auburn this year. That's always an interesting venue for the Hogs to play in. They also host LSU. What do you believe is the most important game on the Hogs schedule?
Well, the Alabama game has been so pivotal for them. When they lost it in 10, when they had a lead, and it was an Alabama team coming off a national championship, but had a lot of younger players on defense. The secondary was somewhat untested. Arkansas had the big lead and just couldn't hold it, and really kind of choked that game away. And although they rebounded okay from that point, it prevented them from reaching a lot of their goals. So that game's always huge. But if you're talking about getting another BCS bid, every one of these games is just magnified. And the early road games at Texas A&M, I think you could also chalk up as being a very critical game. And I just think it's going to be very difficult for the Razorbacks to win all four of their conference road games because it's A&M, a big-time rival that lost 3 in a row to Arkansas, and they're going to really rally up for that. Auburn, always difficult to win there, no matter what the circumstances. And South Carolina and Mississippi State, two teams that might be better than last year. So really, really tough road go for the Hogs this year.
Arkansas has always had an interesting rivalry, at least in basketball, with Missouri. But now, of course, Missouri is joining the SEC, and so Arkansas will be playing them every year in football. What do the Arkansas fans think about that?
Well, they're excited to have a closer neighbor. It will be their closest campus to them in the SEC. And once they get through the 2012 season and they start playing Missouri annually, I think it's going to be a rivalry that grows. And quite frankly, it looks to Razorback fans like LSU wants out of their season-ending game with Arkansas. A&M is a closer rivalry for them. And so they're wanting to kind of highlight that for the Thanksgiving weekend. And I assume that a decade from now, the Arkansas-Missouri game will be a pretty good staple for the Thanksgiving weekend too, and will grow into a good border rivalry. I'm assuming that that's the game that Arkansas will want to conclude its schedule, and it looks like things might be pointing in that direction.
I know this may be very difficult to forecast, but the next coach for Arkansas will be?
No, I can't answer that. I mean, you're talking about his pool of candidates right now would include John L. Smith, a three candidates from the staff probably, and then the rest of Division I football at large. I mean, they want somebody with an SEC ties, perhaps, at least recruiting background in the region. And there's always a name that will come up during the course of a season that hasn't quite been in the spotlight before. And so I anticipate there may be a name like that. You've got to consider guys who are regional standout, guys like Gary Patterson at TCU. I think the guy Hudspeth at Louisiana Lafayette will probably get a glance. What if James Franklin has another big year at Vandy? Could Arkansas potentially lure him away from Nashville? I just think that the roster of candidates right now is really large.
I find it a little interesting you didn't mention Gus Malzahn there, but we'll just let that die because, like I said, I know that's a tough call to make. I mean, there's a lot of time between now and then, and what if John L. Smith were to pull the unthinkable and go undefeated? Who knows? But going back to Bobby Petrino, do you feel like he'll be back in coaching, say, in 2013?
I would say that's greater than 50-50 odds of happening. He's too good of an offensive genius. I mean, when you see him week after week, I mean, his personality is kind of tough to deal with sometimes from the media standpoint. He doesn't have a whole lot of time for us or probably a whole lot of use for us. But when you see what the guy does, preparing his team week after week, the way he takes the knowledge of what a defensive team schemes are and applies that to his game plan and has this recall during the course of a game of tendencies and things like that, it's truly astounding. I did a story very early in his career here. He says he doesn't have a photographic memory, but he's got something that's very akin to that, and that plays to his advantage. And he's such a competitor. He is basically a ruthless competitor. And so somebody's going to want all those qualities in their coach and then deal with the downside of his personality. Now, I can't help but think in the next 6 to 8 months, before December hits and people are, hiring again, that he reassesses who he is, where he's going, and how he's going to treat people, because that's always been to his detriment. And I do not want to discount. I think Gus Malzahn would be in the conversation, perhaps. It's a longer shot, but I think that he would have a shot.
Final question, of course. Yesterday, Penn State was hit as hard as a university can just about be hit without receiving the actual death penalty. I've been saying all night and for the last 24 or so hours that I thought it was a little bit harsh. I thought it was a little bit much. As far as the university goes, I certainly don't think you can do enough things to Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno or his legacy or some of the other various individuals involved. But I know some other people feel the complete opposite. They feel like maybe even Penn State got off lightly, that they should have received the death penalty. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, I know that Penn State has signed off on these, and that they're not going to fight them apparently. But I think what the NCAA is doing is they're getting into dangerous precedent-setting territory to hit them that hard. Now, did I feel like Penn State should be punished? Yes. But what you have now is you have the players in this drama either in jail, dead, or facing criminal charges, and much of the institution has changed. The institution does need to be punished to some degree because it was the entire culture there that helped create the situation. And I think that it was a little bit too harsh. I think that this is going to cripple them for a decade at least, and I would like to have seen perhaps less scholarships, a shorter bowl ban, and the money. I don't have a problem with the money, and all of it combined is super harsh. But taken individually, each of those penalties is also very harsh and crippling. And now, when things progress in other football programs, people are going to say, yeah, but what about that Penn State thing? I keep hearing people talk about Baylor and the things that happened at Baylor many years ago, and there are going to be other issues that crop up that you're going to wonder, will the NCAA reach in here and meet its own form of justice? So it's a slippery slope for presidents.
Totally agree, Tom. And, I think it's pretty hypocritical for a lot of SEC fans. I mean, some in Arkansas. We're here in the state of Alabama. I can tell you right now there are some hosts of this show, me included, that are pretty zealous about our various teams. And if the NCAA wants to go around changing football cultures, well, the SEC has made a living off of preaching that we take football more seriously than everybody else. It's a way of life to us. So I feel like if for us to say, well, it's just a game now, we've gone past that point. I mean, it is a part of our culture.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. And so I don't think any SEC school should be taking any, or their fan base should be taking any glee in how harshly Penn State was punished.
No doubt about it. Tom, thanks so much for being with us, buddy, and best of luck to Arkansas this year. And, I know you guys are going to do some wonderful things up there, even without Petrino, and good luck to you, okay?
Well, I appreciate it. That's up to them now.
All right, bud. Listen, you have a good day, Tom. Come back and be with us sometime. Whoa. I guess he may not be back with us sometime. Who knows? But that's going to do it for this segment of Sportz Blitz Live. That segment was brought to you by Russell Medical Center. Certainly do appreciate everybody over at Russell Medical Center. They do such a fabulous job over there. And if there are any Penn State fans within our region, they may have ended up at Russell Medical Center last night after hearing those sanctions announced. Well, that's going to do it for this Sportz Blitz Live. Be sure and be with us next week. We'll see you then.